Secondly, the political reputation of the State of Israel is intimately linked to questions regarding the situation of Christian communities and Christian property in the Holy Land. Inasmuch as Christians are the largest single group of tourists traveling to Israel, the support of the Christian community is essential to the health of the Israeli economy and to how Israel is viewed in the international community. The 1993 Fundamental Agreement between Israel and the Holy See committed both sides to reaching an equitable resolution of the issue of whether church property in the Holy Land should continue to benefit from the tax-free status it had held prior to Israel's establishment. The vast majority of Christian sites in the Holy Land are churches, hospitals, schools, and pilgrim hostels, many of them quite large, many of them quite old. Should they be required to pay municipal tax on a per square foot basis, many of them would have to close almost immediately since they already work on shoestring budgets. The fact that almost 17 years later, the relevant tax clauses have still not been enacted in Israeli law, despite several bilateral meetings every year, remains a major diplomatic sore spot. Christian critics increasingly argue that Israel has not lived up to its end of the bargain in this very substantial matter. In fact, when things get difficult, Israeli municipal authorities have been known to send hefty bills to Christian establishments, reminding of their accumulated tax debt. Inasmuch as there are still significant political and religious issues outstanding between the Catholic Church and Israel, more than one cynical observer has suggested that it is in Israel's political interest to prolong these negotiations as long as possible to provide a source of economic and political leverage that can be employed against Catholicism if deemed necessary. Leverage that would obviously disappear if the issue of taxes was put in a definitive written form. Although it seems that we are closer than ever to resolving those questions, the fact remains that there is still no legal mechanism defining the fiscal relationship of church properties to the State of Israel, and this continues to be the source of more than a little apprehension, since aggressive enforcement of tax categories could decimate the Christian presence in places like Jerusalem in a matter of months. The longer negotiations drag on about taxes and the status of Christian property in Israel, the more Christians may question the goodwill behind the 1993 diplomatic agreement and the long-term intentions of the Israeli government toward Christian groups. Similarly, insofar as the vast majority of Christians in the Holy Land are Palestinians, the world's Christians follow with keen attention the powder keg situation between Israeli and Palestinians. While sincere efforts to bring healing to that long-standing wound are clearly supported by Christians, the perception of a lack of Israeli goodwill in this regard has resulted in a growing movement by social justice-oriented Christians around the world for economic or cultural sanctions and boycotts against the State of Israel. The influence of Christian churches and groups can play a significant role in endorsing or undermining the legitimacy of Israel and its leadership on the global stage, and can support or harm the Israeli economy. Thirdly, one of the major issues that remains from a Catholic perspective is the degree to which these changed attitudes and the teaching of Vatican II are truly and undeniably rooted in our communities. This is a particular question for at least two reasons. Firstly, the Vatican II generation is rapidly retiring and in some cases dying off. In somewhat the same way that the Jewish community fears that the loss of living witnesses of the Shoah could lead to a gradual forgetfulness of that earth-shattering event, in an analogous way, Catholics need to be concerned that the gains of a half-century of dialogue be institutionalized in such a way that they cannot be undone, even when those who witnessed them are no longer present to speak about their importance. We must find ways of passing on that legacy to the next generation in a stable and lasting way. Has that dialogue sunk deep enough roots in our consciousness, in our dioceses, parishes, and religious communities, so that the bad old days are now irretrievably behind us? The recent questioning of some segments of Vatican II by some groups in the Church raises questions about how durable the new and improved Catholic vision is, and contributes to the suspicion of certain Jewish groups who maintain that the Catholic Church is fundamentally anti-Jewish, and that a 2,000-year-old leopard simply cannot change its spots. If Vatican II's momentum is allowed to peter out or even regress, it will only confirm the worries of some Jews that Christianity cannot be trusted as a dialogue partner and that Nostra Aetate is a wolf in theological sheep's clothing, that nothing has really changed or really can change in Catholicism. Inasmuch as the Catholic-Jewish relationship is the oldest and best established interfaith encounter, it provides the template upon which our outreach to all other faiths is patterned, to Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, and the range of indigenous religions. If Jews and Christians, with their history of pain, can work fruitfully together, then there is a justified hope that a similar model could work in other parts of the world. But if the Jewish-Christian dialogue founders, it calls into question the ability of any two religious groups to build a healthy and life-giving future. In that sense, Christian-Jewish work provides a model, provides inspiration, and provides hope. This will be particularly important for the Jewish-Catholic relationship as the Church itself continues its rapid change, shifting more and more to a church of the southern and eastern hemispheres, cultures for whom the primary interreligious interlocutor will not be Judaism, but rather Islam. Indeed, in most of the nations of the global south, there are few, if any, Jews to encounter. There are justified fears that an increasing emphasis on conversation with the infinitely larger Muslim community could siphon energy and resources away from conversation with Jews. If the Jewish-Catholic relationship is not solid and deeply rooted, it runs the risk of being minimized or ignored as Catholicism becomes more and more a faith centered in Africa, South America, and Asia, and not in North America and Western Europe. We must think seriously about what it will take to keep Jewish-Catholic dialogue at the forefront of religious discussions when political and cultural pressures will more and more indicate the Islamic world as the focus of Catholic attention, and perhaps the attention of a future pope who is likely himself to be African, South American, or Asian, who will have little or no personal experience of Judaism beyond what he knows of the Bible and his seminary textbooks. It is a challenge I think we need to prepare ourselves for in a thoughtful and realistic way. Fourthly, there need to be greater efforts on both sides to come to know the other on the level of the positive and negative aspects of our shared history and culture. My friends in Israel tell me that there is a sometimes appalling level of ignorance regarding Christianity on the part of many Israelis, even very well-educated ones, and that much of what Jews, especially in Israel, know about Christianity is predominantly focused on Christian intolerance and violence, with seldom a word spoken about the great turnaround of the last 50 years, which is largely unfamiliar to many Israelis and many diaspora Jews, and let's admit it, to many Catholics as well. We have not done as good a job as we might in teaching people about the sea change that has occurred in our lifetimes, which is truly a good news story at a time when rising fundamentalism and extremism seems to be driving religions further and further apart. People need to know what the last 50 years has meant to the Jewish-Christian relationship. Indeed, when I speak about these events in many Catholic parishes and schools, what I get is a kind of stunned, fascinated silence. This is all new for almost everyone who listens to me. We must do a better job of public relations, of getting the word out to the average Catholic and Jew, so that people are accurately informed about the state of relations between us and of the challenges that remain. Similarly, we Christians must learn in humility and honesty about some of the darker moments in our history, which some of us have never heard about because our history textbooks and catechism classes conveniently omitted them. But as Father Edward Flannery, a distinguished historian of Christian anti-Semitism, once commented, the pages that Christians have torn from their history books are the very pages Jews have memorized. It is only by facing up to the awkward parts of our history that we can properly understand the reticence of some Jews to engage with Christians and the suspicion that behind all the Christian kindness in the world, there lurks a latent intention to nudge all Jews toward the baptismal font. Is Christian interreligious dialogue merely a polite way of softening up Jews to view Christianity with more sympathy and perhaps a more politically correct way of attracting converts. There are certainly Jews for whom this is a source of apprehension, for whom Christianity is, and may be for many generations, a religious wolf in sheep's clothing. And given our long history, it is hard to blame them for those suspicions. As Pope John Paul repeatedly reminded us in the lead up to the year 2000, the Catholic Church has nothing to fear from the truth, and even looking at the most painful periods of our history in an objective, balanced, and nuanced way. Are we willing to confront the events and experiences of which we are less than proud, while also situating them accurately in a very different time and mindset? Can we find a way of telling the Christian story that acknowledges humbly where mistakes have been made, but also uses that process as a springboard to renewal, growth, and transformation? An Orthodox Catholic understanding of the Church sees it, like Jesus, as possessing a character that is simultaneously both human and divine. And where that humanity has failed, we must be prepared to admit our mistakes, knowing that they in no way detract from the Church's divinely mandated mission and throw us again and again on the love and mercy of God, who is faithful despite every human sin. 50 years may be a relatively short period in the history of two ancient faiths like Judaism and Christianity. But these last 50 years have been a remarkable period, without precedent in the interaction of our religions. Although some today argue whether Vatican II was really that novel after all, I find it difficult to look at Catholicism a century ago and not be struck by how much has changed, and changed for the better. And yet in God's providence and sense of humor, all of that can be traced back to a summer Monday morning in 1960, to a pregnant discussion between two men who in our culture could easily have been confined to a nursing home. And if they had been, how much would our world have been deprived of? Because of the fruit of Jules Isaac's plea to John the 23rd, a wave of reaction occurred in Christianity that is still continuing to play itself out as we speak, and whose final implications we cannot guess at. It is a hopeful reminder to all of us of what individuals of passion, empathy, and respect can accomplish with each other's help, and a parable of how God so often works through unusual and unexpected instruments. This summer when I visited Yad Vashem, the International Holocaust Memorial in Jerusalem, I heard a teacher say to her students that once you have come into contact with a witness, that contact obliges you to yourself become a witness. It is my humble hope that by learning more about the hope-filled past of Jewish Catholic relations, you yourselves will leave tonight as builders and prophets of a more hope-filled future that we all yearn for. As our faiths say in their respective languages, Inshallah, Deo volente, Yehi ratzon lecha, Adonai. May such be your will, O God. Thank you.